Greetings, my name is Mikael, and I'm giving you a short presentation on the topic of conflict management styles of Albanian corporations operating in the construction sector. So to start off with the purpose of the study, the purpose of the study is to see how conflict is managed in these corporations, and due to the fact that this sector is one of the most important countries' economic development. The questions that this research raises are what conflict style is used in these corporations, and if this style is the same as the one suggested by the literature on conflict management. So the research model used is that of Rahim, used two dimensions, conflict for self and conflict for others. And based on how these two dimensions score, he gathered 5 different conflict management styles. The first one being in integrating. This is regarded as the most efficient one, and due to the fact that communication is involved and the relationships between employees are valued. So the next one is obliging. Obliging scores low on concern for self and high in concern for others. This means that the individual sacrifices some of their needs in order to keep the harmony of the group untouched. The other style is avoiding. This means that the conflict is not regarded at all. The issue keeps being pushed, and this creates a toxic environment in the company due to the fact that conflict is never resolved and it keeps building up. The next one is the dominating style. The dominating style scores high in concern for self and low in concern for others. This is turning some sort of competition because one party always wants to dominate and always wants to win in a sort of way and does not let go. And this is positive and negative. Positive due to the fact that if the person has a good basis on what they think, if they have good arguments, they should push for what they believe. But if it's turned into competition, it turns the environment in a more toxic environment rather than something that is good and healthy. And then the next style is compromising style, which is the middle ground. It means that both stances figure out a mutually acceptable solution by sacrificing some and gaining some. So the literature review starts off with a definition of conflict. The definition of conflict are made by different authors through different time periods, and they all agree due to the fact that conflict is different among people. They all say the same thing, but they take into consideration different things like values, like beliefs, and everything. So, but the basis is the same. Conflict is the difference between people that share an environment together. So there are different views of conflict. The classical view of conflict is a view that views conflict as a threat and that it harms efficiency. So to minimize this, they use procedures and principles to follow in order to avoid conflict or to keep it at a minimum. This is the way that Taylor and Weber thought. Followed another classicist. She thought that to measure the progress of the organization, conflict must be looked at. The neoclassical view is kind of the same as the classical view, but they focus more on the social skills. So conflict leads to them a lack of social skills and is regarded therefore not economic. And the modern view of conflict, they view some conflict as something that is unavoidable and something that should be regarded. So the main goal of the organizations is to be able to see the problems and try to solve them. So conflict is unavoidable, but it should be solved. It should be managed. It is seen as a way to bring collaboration between people, and if managed well, it can help with motivation of employees, control, group dynamics, innovation, and problem solving. So there are different sorts of conflict. So conflict comes from different sources: interests, values, goals, many things. This all bring conflict, and this shows that how unavoidable is conflict in an organization due to being so many sources of it. Then there are different types of conflict. Intrapersonal is the conflict between the person himself or herself. Then is the interpersonal conflict, the disagreement between two people. And there is the intragroup conflict, the disagreement between members of the same group, discussions in teams and everything. And there is the intergroup conflict. The intergroup conflict means that two teams, two departments have a conflict with each other. This also shows how unpredictable conflict is, because it can happen in any instance in the organization. So therefore, we go to the conflict management. The conflict management should focus on the constant improvement of the organization. And in order to manage conflict, conflict should be analyzed. Conflict as a reason should be analyzed, should see the impact, the implications, and also should, the style of resolution should be regarded. The individual style of conflict is impacted by the group. So if group chooses to view conflict as something positive, as something that should be managed, as something that should be solved, then therefore the individual picks the same style. So, you know, the group impacts what the individual thinks. And to assess conflict management is used the model of dual concern, which is the model of dimensions that was mentioned earlier. And this focuses on concern for self and concern for others. There are different types of conflict management. Some focus on the situation and attitudes, some focus on the values, some focus on social learning. So different ways of approach in the conflict management. One thing that should be regarded is the diversity. Due to the organizational environment being more diverse, conflict may be rising. So, you know, different views, different beliefs bring more conflict in an organization. And this way, culture has an impact on conflict and its management. So in order to gain most of it, conflict should be managed and diversity should be regarded as something that impacts conflict. The main purpose is not to let conflict run its destructive course, but to help parties find a solution for the problem and to keep a good atmosphere in the company. So these are the styles that were mentioned earlier: integrating, obliging, dominating, avoiding, compromising styles, which were used by Rahim. So there are different strategies in managing conflict, but the most important one is that communication is the key. In order to manage conflicts successfully, people must communicate with each other, share. These core values are the same as the ethical values: by respecting diversity, being just, participating. So, you know, it's kind of the same. No mistakes made during conflict. Conflict should be approached with caution. Like, it should not be avoided, but it should be approached with caution. People should not generalize, or should not overanalyze, should not blame the problem on others, and should not turn it into competition. They should also listen and not keep a defensive stance, but also be helpful. The methodology used in this study is a quantitative approach. It uses mainly primary data gathered from a questionnaire. Questionnaire is based on 20 statements made by Rahim to assess the styles used. So all these statements are connected to the styles. So they are evaluated in a 5-point Likert scale, which means they are given a score, and they are divided into different styles. So, you know, these statements assess several statements assess a certain style, and in the end, they all gather together. The study is an exploratory one, and the approach is that of deduction, that the theory is tested if it's sense or not. Sampling, so the sampling is non-probability one, and the purposive sampling. And the target population are the people in Tirana working on companies operating in the construction sector. In all, the sample size was 152 employees. The participants include managers, subordinates, occupying different positions and departments. So the hypothesis is that the style used to manage conflict in Albania construction firms is integrating, and the alternative hypothesis is that the style used to manage conflict is not integrated. So this hypothesis is based on what the researchers suggest, other researchers, which view integrating as the most efficient style. So is this used or not? So the findings, the general information that we gather from the findings is that the main age group is that of people from 31 years old to 50, the main education that the majority of the people have a master's degree, and they have 7+ years of experience in this field. This means that the people that answered this questionnaire and the statements that validate the statements are people that have a certain experience in this field, and they have been working in this field for several years now and are of a certain age. So these are the findings. So to assess these statements, they were gathered, the statements by their number. It was calculated the mean for each statement according to the answers that people give, and then the average was the total of the means was subtracted by the number of the items. So this way the means were gathered. So for each conflict management style. And from the findings, the discussion, the highest mean was that of the integrated style, which was 4.4, and this is supported by the previous literature. So this style that was used by these employees is the same style that the literature suggests of using. So this proves the hypothesis 0, and this is that this style in Albania is the same as the one used suggested abroad by the researchers mainly. This style manages conflict better because it focuses on creating a relationship and moving towards a solution. This style evokes innovation and also keeps the relationships strong because people share information, people are more open to each other, and they do not turn this into competition or avoid conflict at all. So the findings also converge about the least preferred style. So the least preferred style, according to Berkeley, in 1970 were deemed dominating and avoiding due to the situation they're creating in the company, being the situation being more toxic. So this also converged with the findings. They in the research, dominating and avoiding had also the lowest means. This implies that the Albanian organizations are familiar with conflict. They deal with it using the integrated method. They have high concern for self and for others. And another implication would be not to avoid conflict, but to learn to manage it and use it in the benefit of the company. Conflict should be seen as something that helps it or organizations rather than a disadvantage. Also, styles that should not be used are dominating or avoiding due to their increased toxicity, due to the fact that they increase toxicity in the environment. So the conclusions that were gathered were that Rahim presented 2 dimensions, concern for self and for others, and he gathered from that 5 different styles: integrating, dominating, obliging, avoiding, and compromising. He assessed these styles by a set of statements, and they were scrambled, and people valued these statements from 1 to 5, and means were gathered for each statement, and then for the total of means. So the most preferred conflict management style in Albania was that of integrating. This shows that people value relationships. They see conflict as something that needs to be resolved for the company to go ahead, and for the company to have a better environment in general. Meanwhile, the least preferred styles were that of avoiding and dominating, which show that people tend to not avoid conflict, but to face it. And they do not need this increased toxicity that these 2 styles bring due to the increased competition or to the unresolved issues from previous conflict which remain unresolved. So this was in general. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.